Hi, welcome to the Live and Invest Overseas podcast. My name is Kat Kalashian. I am based in Paris, France, and I am the senior Europe editor for Live and Invest Overseas. Live and Invest Overseas doesn't just talk about Paris, where I am based. It doesn't just talk about France or Europe, but we talk about everywhere in the world that might be of interest for any North American, or really anyone all over the world, looking to live or invest overseas. And because we cover so many various topics, we receive many dozens of questions every day via email or by phone. Some people call our office located in Panama, our headquarters down there in Panama, where I also lived for 7 years. I've been in France now for about 5 years. And this year, we had our annual customer service report where we went over all of the major trends and considerations that people are thinking about as they look towards this idea of potentially moving overseas, perhaps retiring overseas, maybe working overseas, or maybe just making an investment in another currency or another country in order to diversify your portfolio, earn money in another currency, which can be a big benefit if you have other dealings in that country, especially if you're living there, especially. So I decided to compile all of the number one frequently asked questions that we receive year in, year out. And I've looked at the past 3 years of our frequently asked questions, and they pretty much all overlap. So let's just get right into it. How safe are the countries that you suggest? Well, we're never going to suggest that you move somewhere that's unsafe. So generally speaking, you could say as a blanket statement, any place that we suggest or recommend for living overseas is generally a safe place to be, to spend time, to live, to work, to enjoy life. That said, every place has some darker sides to it. You know, no place is perfect. I can attest to that better than anyone, having lived in many places all over the world. No place is perfect. And every place has some amount of crime. So if you're living in a big, densely populated city or a resort town or any place that receives a lot of tourists every year, there's going to be a fair amount of petty crime. There's going to be pickpockets to worry about when you're on public transportation. Conversely, if you're living in a rural area, very isolated from neighbors, you might need to invest in a home security system, perhaps just a dog, because if you're that removed and remote, your house might become a target for home burglaries, for example. Some countries have issues with car break-ins, burglaries of cars. So every place does have, usually some concern to look at, but it's usually a very limited thing that, it only affects people in certain areas, like on the tourist spots or on public transportation. Every city in America has got some back alley that you don't want to spend time in or walk down alone late at night. So practice some common sense everywhere you go. Don't flaunt jewelry in a developing country. Don't leave your phone on the table in a cafe when you're eating outside on the street. Anybody could walk by and just slip it in their pocket. And keep your backpack on your front when you're riding on the metro or the bus. These are just common sense little things to make sure that you avoid being a target of any petty crime, any small scale crime. I will say, having lived overseas for more than half my life, I have only ever had any crime affect me in the United States. I have never once been the victim of any kind of mugging, pickpocketing, or anything else anywhere but in the United States, for what that is worth. And I will also add, not that I want to stir the pot here, but I will add that most of the countries that we talk about actually warn their citizens against going to the US. So all of those little government guidelines that you get saying don't go to Mexico because there are drug cartels that'll run you off the road and you're sure to be kidnapped. Mexico is also sending out those advisories to their own citizens saying, don't go up to the States because there are quite a number of mass shootings, for example. So every place has its issues. It pays to be smart. It pays to use some common sense. But generally speaking, any place that we're talking about, if we're talking about it, it means that it's safe to be there. And we, for what it's worth, have all spent time there. We editors have gone there ourselves. We have put our boots on the ground, as we say. We've looked around, so we know that what it feels like for ourselves. If it feels safe, if it feels like a place that you would want to spend time alone. And aside from that, we always make sure to set up contacts in the place that we're looking at. So we're speaking with expats who live there all the time and they're sharing their concerns with us. So we always like to balance all of our coverage with these potential downsides. And so if they are there, we will make sure that you are aware of them. Is there a government in place? Well, obviously this is a very generalized question. And it's unclear, all of the people that are asking this question when they call into us or write into us, it's unclear exactly which country. They could be talking about 10 different countries between them. But I will say, as another blanket statement, that all of the countries that we talk about have democratic elections. They have, fully established, regulated governments that have been in place for, many decades and are reliable and structured. So there's really no danger of us telling you to go somewhere where there might be some kind of political situation that might cause you any strife. Now, of course, there are some caveats to this. So we do talk about Thailand, and Thailand does tend to have some military coups every once in a while. However, because we know many people living on the ground in Thailand and they're keeping us up to date on a, minute to minute basis, even when there is a military coup and the military is in power in Thailand, it makes no difference to the average person living, certainly not the average expat living there. And most people say things actually tend to work better when there's been a coup in Thailand. So specifically about Thailand, it is a parliamentary system. It's a constitutional monarchy. So while it may not be the democracy that you're used to, it's a monarchy versus a democracy, it's still a perfectly stable system that has been running for a long time and poses no risk to you in any way. Can you share some real estate information, including where to buy and rent, and how difficult it is to obtain in-country financing from a bank? Well, the best place to go for general real estate information about whether it's renting or buying for personal use or for investment is to sign up for our free weekly Overseas Property Alert newsletter. Again, that is free. It will come into your inbox every Tuesday, and you'll hear from some interesting place somewhere in the world that presents a fun opportunity either for investment or for some other kind of real estate investment. So on where to buy and rent, this is obviously going to depend on the country that you're looking at, but we recommend, first of all, that you get to know the country as well as you possibly can before you even start to look at housing of any kind. First of all, you're not going to move to, let's say, Spain, for example. You're going to move to Barcelona. And in fact, you're not even going to move to Barcelona. You're going to move to one of Barcelona's neighborhoods. Not just that, you'll be on a certain street in that neighborhood. And so you see where I'm getting. I'm narrowing things down little by little. And it really does matter that much down to the side of the street that you want to be on. And these are all considerations to take, but you can only take them once you have narrowed down your frame of interest. So when it comes to buying or renting, always rent first, because as I say, you don't know exactly which side of the street you might want to be on until you've lived on it for a little while. You might not know that one side of this neighborhood gets really rowdy at night, or that the trash trucks are very loud at a certain hour of the night on one street, which seems like a funny random little thing, but in Paris, the trash trucks are quite noisy, and it is actually something to consider when you're living someplace or choosing where to live in the city. So we always recommend that you rent first and get a really good idea of where in the city you would want to be, down to the street and the side of the street, which end of the street, north or south. How difficult to obtain financing? It is possible in some countries. This, again, is going to vary by country. It can be possible. The terms are never going to be as good as they are in North America, where terms are extremely lenient and very favorable for you. Usually, also, there's a cutoff age, so you're not usually going to be able to get a mortgage past, say, the age of 73, I think is one of the normal cutoff points. And you will only get a far fewer number of years. So you might be able to get a 10-year mortgage, for example. And you're never going to see anything like a 30-year fixed mortgage. So the mortgaging overseas works very, very differently from the way it does back home. And you'll want to look into that in the country that you're looking into specifically. But keep in mind that if you are coming in looking to invest in a country to receive residency, which is an option in many countries, you can buy a piece of real estate and then the country offers you the residency. You can't do that if you are mortgaging or financing your home. It's only, upfront cash that works for. So there are many countries where it is possible. It's generally not worth the hassle, though, unless you really need it, because it's not going to be that much of a help to you, frankly. Can you suggest a travel protection insurance? Absolutely. I personally have a travel plan for my insurance. I don't have local French insurance and I don't have US insurance. I travel all over the world, so I have a travel policy that follows me everywhere I go. If I fall down the stairs in the United States, I will be covered there as well as I am here in France. where I have had a pregnancy and gone through all of that with my policy here in France, or if I were to be visiting Panama, got bit by a snake, whatever, I will be covered no matter where I go in the world. And what I recommend is to speak with our broker who handles these policies, and we'll give you a link here on the screen to do just that. So if you are interested in a travel insurance policy for your travels or for making a move overseas, because this often insurance policy is a requirement for seeking residency in a new country. The country wants to make sure that you're not a burden to them after just coming in, that you're not going to, have a heart attack and need to be hospitalized for 6 months right after getting to the country, and it'll be on their dime. The way that they avoid that liability is by requiring you to have private insurance when you enter the country. And then, of course, once you come into the country, you can change it to a local plan or get into the public system if that is a possibility for you based on your scenario. In the meantime, though, a travel policy can provide that requirement when you seek residency. So a travel policy is incredibly useful. It can be incredibly affordable, very, very good coverage. I recommend it all the way. So again, follow this link and put in your details, and our travel insurance broker will get back to you shortly. What about the transportation overseas? Are there public transportations, taxis, and Ubers readily available and secure overseas? This, again, depends on the country that you're going to go to. But generally speaking, yes, almost all of Europe, I can say in kind of a blanket statement, Europe has fantastic public transport, generally speaking, better than anywhere that you're going to find in the United States, at least. I'm not sure about Canada, but great public transportation systems, both throughout the continent and within cities. So from Paris here in my hub, I can get a train to practically anywhere in Europe and get a very quick plane ride to anywhere in Europe. I can drive many places. Europe is much more compact than the United States is. So I can drive to many places, many other countries within just a couple hours. So yes, fantastic public transportation. Trains, especially throughout Europe, are great. When it comes to Latin America, this is a little bit more hit and miss. There are some cities with great public transportation systems, but this is still something that is developing. So Panama was the first country in Central America to install a metro. I believe it was completed in 2015. It might have been longer than that, but they're still building it. They've got 3 lines now, and it's still being expanded. It will continue to improve, but it's still something that their city is feeling growing pains. Building a metro is no small feat. So in the meantime, the city has really suffered from bad traffic and closed down roads. Meantime, it has gotten all much better, and the lines that are currently being built are further out of the city. So there's less tumult in the city when new lines are being built. But as I say, Panama is a thought leader in this, in terms of Central America at least. So it's not necessarily going to be typical to find in Central America to find this level of coverage. Mexico is still North America, so it's not Central America. But Mexico has fantastic public transportation within some cities. So Mexico City has some of the most advanced systems in the world. Many of the beach towns that are so popular with tourists and expats on both coasts, Pacific and Caribbean coasts, they also will provide things like good shuttle systems or good buses. In the interior, if you're outside of a big city and outside of the coasts, it's not going to be quite as reliable. Cities in South America also, there are a few cities in South America that have some good transportation systems. Buenos Aires, of course, is known for being a big modern city, and there are several other. Santiago is another. So there are many places where if public transportation and going without a car specifically is your concern, there are many places that we can recommend. And if you are thinking about living somewhere without a car, I recommend you go to that video that I filmed specifically about going carless overseas to see what that's all about and where we recommend to go without a car. When it comes to taxis and Ubers, that's really a very different question. And it depends not just on the country, but on the city and the town. So here in France, for example, where I live, Paris has many, many car share services, car hailing services, including Uber, but many, many others besides. Panama City, I can also say, has many others aside from Uber. I find Uber to be the most ubiquitous company found overseas. So if you have an Uber account already, you're very likely to be able to use it overseas, but only in the big cities. So I have visited many other towns in France since I've been living here, and many of them do not have an Uber system, an Uber network. And many of them don't even have great taxi networks. So in Paris, again, there's a great taxi system. It's G7 in French, and there's Uber and a billion others besides. But you're not going to find all of those in the smaller towns in the South, even in the bigger towns, really. There are very, very limited Uber networks. So this is something that you'll want to look up depending on the specific place that you're thinking of moving. I will say, when it comes to Latin America, that Ubers can be a really, really great alternative to taxis, because taxis had a monopoly on transportation for so long. They've become unscrupulous in many places. This was especially true of Panama City before Uber moved in. Taxi drivers were absolute scam artists, and they were dangerous, frankly, as well, especially if you were a single woman and even a single man. I've heard of some horror stories of men getting a taxi at night and then being driven at gunpoint to an ATM to empty out their account and give it to the taxi driver. So the taxis were completely unregulated and frankly just not a good option. So Uber came in, and the taxis were not happy about that. They fought against that tooth and nail, but Uber won. Uber did manage to maintain its hold in Panama City. It's almost always a more realistic value that you're being given. So here in Paris, an Uber is almost always less expensive than a taxi. In Panama, they were very, very, very affordable and also regulated. So when a taxi may have been the same price, it might have been cheaper, but odds were you are going to be charged more because you are an English speaker, or you're obviously a foreigner, or you're obviously a tourist. And so you'll just be gouged. And so the Ubers, because they don't know who you are when you sign up on the app, they can't see that you're already a tourist, or they can't see already that you're a tourist. And so the prices are all regulated, and the prices are incredibly cheap. I had a friend in Panama with me a few months ago, and when we ordered her an Uber to take her to the airport, she said, well, that can't be right. I think it was maybe 10 euros or something to take her to the airport. She was like, well, no, that's ridiculous. That can't be right. I think she wanted to get an Uber by herself. And when she saw that the rate was about $2 or $3, she thought, well, clearly the app's not working. But those are the realistic rates in some parts of the world. Next question. Can I transfer my Social Security check into an overseas bank? Yes, you can continue to receive your Social Security benefits overseas. Even after you've moved, even after you become a resident overseas, you can still continue to receive these, and they can be direct deposited into pretty much any bank overseas. There are a small handful of countries that won't allow it. I think North Korea, Vietnam, China, probably. But I'm actually not even sure about China. But countries that have tended to have some issues with the United States in the past have put a law against that in place to make things a little bit more difficult for Americans living there. But any place that we recommend, yes, you can have your Social Security check auto deposited into your bank account overseas, no problem. Would I lose my original citizenship if I move overseas? No, absolutely not. That is not something that can happen accidentally. If you want to renounce your United States citizenship, you will have to, or your Canadian citizenship, or whoever you may be, wherever you may be from, if you would like to renounce that former original citizenship, you can't do it by mistake. You have to be very, very dedicated to making it happen. So even if you gain residency overseas, which is just a visa that allows you to live there legally for a set number of years, potentially only 1 year, potentially multiple years, even if you gain that residency. And even if you become a citizen of that new country, you're very unlikely to have to lose or renounce your American citizenship. So the small caveat here is that there are some countries that don't allow for dual passport holding. They don't allow for dual passport holders. So Spain is one of these countries. So in Spain, as in most countries, if you live as a permanent resident there for 5 years, generally that's the number. It can be more, it can be 10, it can even be 20, but typically it's about 5 years. It can even be shorter in some cases. After 5 years as a permanent resident, say, you can opt to be naturalized, which means to take on the citizenship. And there will be requirements. There's very likely to be a language exam and a cultural exam, perhaps a history exam, interviews, possibly multiple interviews. But at the end of the day, you'll get that passport from that new country. And in most cases, you'll be able to hold the 2 passports. In fact, you could even hold 3 or 4 or 5, depending on the requirements for each country. However, there are countries that don't allow this. So as I said, Spain is one. And if you go to Spain and you live there as a permanent resident for 5 years and you choose to become a Spanish citizen and you go in for naturalization, once you are made a Spanish citizen and handed your Spanish passport, you'll be asked to renounce your American passport and citizenship. So that is one of the big exceptions. There are many countries that do this, not many that we talk about. In most of the cases that we talk about, countries do allow for dual citizenship, which is a great boon for people that would like to have, for example, an EU, a European passport, as well as an American passport. Those are 2 of the most powerful passports in the world, or Canadian. Those are some of the most powerful passports in the world. So to have one from each continent is a massive benefit in terms of not needing to request visas to travel, in terms of being able to stay in Europe for as long as you want, which you can't do as an American citizen. So having multiple passports can be really, really great, but there are some countries that don't allow it. However, the enforcement of the renunciation varies country to country. From the one end of the spectrum, we have Singapore, for example, where if you become a Singaporean citizen, they will escort you, literally take you down to the US Embassy, hold your hand as you do it, and watch you renounce your citizenship. That is how serious they are about making sure that any Singaporean citizen only is ever a Singaporean citizen. On the other side of the spectrum, Panama technically doesn't allow for 2 passports, but it never enforces it. It never checks up on this. The possible downside of that is that you could be holding your 2 passports, your Panamanian and your American passport, or your Canadian passport. You could be holding both of those for years on end, just flying under the radar, because it's not technically disallowed or allowed. It's kind of a gray area, but that could become a very defined area in the future. It could be that one day the government decides they're going to crack down on this and they're going to go after every single person that ever got a Panamanian passport by naturalization and go and follow up with them to see if they've given up their other citizenship. And there are cases where Panamanians can hold 2 passports because, of course, there is the Canal Zone. If you were born in the Canal Zone, you are naturally an American and a Panamanian. So there are lots of caveats. As you see, this can be a very winding road and difficult to parse out, to tease out. But the simple answer to, if I move overseas, will I lose my citizenship, is no. If you move overseas, you're just moving overseas. If you want to renounce your US citizenship or any other citizenship, you will have to go through a process to do so. And frankly, the US doesn't want to lose you. You're a taxpayer. As long as you are a US citizen, you are under the IRS's thumb. You have to report to them every year, and you likely owe them something every year. So they don't want to see you go. They're going to make it as difficult as possible to have you renounce. That said, renunciations from America grow each year almost exponentially because it's annoying to have to deal with taxes even though you don't live or work in the United States. And this is something that a lot of expats have felt over the years and have decided to just be done with that concern. Do I need to get any shots to live overseas or to go overseas? This will depend on the country that you're going to, but any place that we recommend does not require any additional shots that you wouldn't already have. You would have had a tetanus shot. You would have had your measles, mumps, and rubella shots. All of these vaccines that are typical across the world are required in any country, but no one's going to check up on the fact that you had your MMR booster when you were, 15 or something. Nobody's going to check up on your tetanus shot. Of course, that's at your discretion. You should get a new one every 10 years just to be safe. But no, there is no country that we talk about or recommend for living or investing that requires any kind of vaccine that you don't already have. That said, if you want to travel to any of the countries that we don't necessarily talk about on a regular basis. Kenya, for example, you'd probably want to get a yellow fever vaccination. And there are other concerns. So, for example, Zika has always been a concern in the equatorial part of Latin America. And that is still a concern in that part of the world today. It is no longer talked about anywhere else in the world. But of course, Zika doesn't affect you unless you're pregnant. So unless you're a pregnant woman, There's really no danger. Malaria exists worldwide. The West Nile virus exists in the US and nowhere else. So every place does have some health concerns that are particular to it. And if they are a concern to you, you should do your research and take any precautions ahead of time. There are anti-malarial pills, for example. Can I drink the water overseas? Again, this always depends on where exactly you're looking. Generally speaking, though, most big cities in the world are going to have potable tap water. There are some other things to consider, though. So, for example, in Paris, which has some of the best drinking water in the world, and it is available for free all over. There are not just drinking fountains, there are sparkling water fountains here in France. You can go to some local grocery stores, for example, take your bottle and fill it up with still water and take another one and fill it up with sparkling water and take your sparkling water home. It's a free service that the city provides. That said, the buildings of Paris are very, very old. Some of them have not had their plumbing fixed up or updated in the past 30, 50, who knows how many years. That's just something that you might want to think about depending on how old your building is, on if you can verify when the plumbing was last looked at. So little things to keep in mind. Water also does taste different everywhere. So this can be a very personal thing. Some people I know are very susceptible or very sensitive to the different tastes in water. So if you are, just buy some bottled water. I will note that bottled water overseas is not nearly as expensive as it is in the United States. I don't know about its Canadian prices, but several of my American friends who have come to France have been shocked when they look at bottled water on the shelves and how little it costs. Of course, if you're buying a little bottle of Evian from the little refrigerator next to the checkout counter, it's going to be a normal price, a couple euros probably. But if you're going down to buy a 6-pack of 2-liter bottles of water, it's practically free. It's like 20 cents a bottle. So it's very affordable to drink bottled water if you prefer to. Now, I've been talking about Europe. When it comes to Latin America, this is definitely something that you should pay more attention to. If you're in any kind of rural area or a place that's using well water, then you're going to want to stick with bottled water. Again, big cities, this shouldn't be a concern for you. Panama City, Mexico City, Buenos Aires, many cities in Latin America do have great potable drinking water, and you shouldn't be concerned about it. But some people do have more sensitive systems. And so for example, my mother, she just knows that she just doesn't like to take the risk. And of all of the ways that you can risk getting sick overseas, bottled water is one of the easiest ways to make sure that isn't a concern. So no matter where she is, she drinks bottled water. Kind of kills the environmentalist in me, but to each their own. Can I bring my pets with me to the Live and Invest Overseas conferences? This depends on what conference you're talking about. We do host conferences all over the world, in the US usually once a year, and at least 8 other countries throughout the year. And this is going to depend on the country's importation laws, but it's probably too stressful to think about bringing your pet to overseas just for a few days or for a week for a conference. In terms of actually bringing them physically to the conference, hotels are going to have their own rules. I don't know all of the hotels that we will ever use in the world, and I can't say that they will all be pet friendly. Of course, any support animal is likely to be given a pass. Keep in mind, though, that an emotional support animal may not be seen as legitimately overseas as it is in America, where you can have a letter from a therapist saying that you require, to have your dog with you at all times. And that probably won't cut it overseas. It might, depending on who you talk to. But of course, anybody who actually needs a seeing eye dog or any other kind of aid animal, that's going to be allowed into the conference venue. I will say as well, though, that the paperwork and the cost of transporting a pet overseas is probably more of a headache than you want to deal with on this little jaunt overseas. And always keep in mind the amount of stress that travel will have on an animal who has no idea what's going on and really has no personal motivation to get on a plane the way that you do. You've got that motivation because you're thinking, I want to go to the beach. I want to swim in the ocean. I want to spend a week in a nice hotel with a pool. Your pet has none of that. And your pet probably isn't going to enjoy the experience of being left in a hotel room for hours a day in an environment it doesn't know. So probably just not a great idea, but I won't say that it's not possible. How dependable are the mailing and postal systems overseas? In Europe, the post works very well, but the taxes are ridiculous. So if you have anyone send you a gift from overseas, well, just don't. Tell everyone you know, do not send me a thing. And if you do, make sure you mark on the customs form that its value is less than $30 and it is a gift. Because otherwise, the amount of taxes you pay on it to receive it will likely be more than the value of the thing being sent over. I've been bitten this way, stung, burned, however you want to say it. I've been caught out by this several times since I've moved to Europe. And I've told everyone, don't send us anything. The way to get around that is to use the country's Amazon version. So in France, we have Amazon.fr. Spain has Amazon.es. Italy has Amazon.it. I think Portugal's is PO. So tell your family if they want to send you a gift, go to the country's Amazon and send it from that Amazon account. That's the only way to get around these fees and taxes. Amazon has a straight line through all of this bureaucratic nonsense. However, in Latin America, it's a completely different story. Do not depend on the mailing system or any kind of postal system in Latin America. Many expats that we know have actually moved overseas and set up what are called mail forwarding systems. Mail forwarding systems do exist already in many countries south of the border. Mailboxes, etc. is one. Airbox Express is another. There will probably be some specific ones to whatever country you're looking at, but those are two that I know are pretty much pan-continental. So what these do basically are they set up a PO box for you in the United States, typically in Florida. And things get sent to that PO box. And then from that PO box, this company brings them down to your little mailbox in, say, Panama. When I lived in Panama, I depended on that greatly. I was able to buy things through Amazon that way. I was able to buy lots of things that I couldn't get cheaply in Panama. I was able to get sent that way, or, to subscribe to magazines, or to order English books, to have friends send you cards for the holidays. That's what these companies are great for. And as I said, we've known many, many expats who have actually gone to a place, realized that they wanted mail and there was no mail service. So they set one up and they set up this, a version of this mail forwarding service. And in some places, they've had massive success with it and have become, very happily well off, very comfortably living in their new little Caribbean haven. And they work a few days a week at this little business that's almost a side hustle. So mailing systems overseas, it depends on the country. It even depends on the continent, really. But generally speaking, Latin America is not so dependable, although it is getting better. When I lived there, for example, the electricity bills were not digitized. They were thrown through your gate. Well, you hope it was thrown through your gate. But between wind and rain and dogs and cats and whatever else, it was quite common to miss bills and have your electricity be turned off because you had no idea that you owed them money. So things are getting better. Things now are digitized. You can set up direct deposit for a lot of these billing things in many countries, especially in capital cities. But it's something to keep in mind that you probably want to start receiving as little mail as possible when you move overseas.